See, being a shepherd is almost the perfect kind of preparation for a man to learn virtue. Why is that? Well, you have to have fortitude. You have to have courage. You have to have temperance. You have to have self-control. You can't fly off the handle on the sheep and kill them. You know, because they're your investment. They're going to give you wool and mutton and whatnot. And you can't just beat on them. You got to take care of them. It teaches you patience, right? Got patience with these stupid animals, as Elias was telling us. Some of the stupidest animals in the world. You know, if a sheep wanders into a stream, its wool gets all wet and it will drown, right? And they're not real smart about that. So you can't take them to drink by like a raging torrent, because if they try to drink from a raging torrent, they get into that swift water, their wool gets wet and they'll get swept downstream. So what do you have to do? You have to bring them to still waters, right? So doesn't Psalm 23 say he leads me beside still waters? So you have to watch out for these animals. So you have patience, and then also as a shepherd you have to have humility, because you do all this hard work, you live outdoors, you fight off wild beasts with sticks and stones in your bare hands. It's this arduous labor, but you don't get a lot of glamour for it. You know, it's not a high status profession. Father is right that it's not like a dishonorable profession, and you can take some pride in your work, and there's this noble heritage of shepherding. But at the same time, it's not a glamour job. So you have to do all this work, and after it's all said and done, you know, nobody claps for you when you get back to the village, like, ah, the shepherd! Right. They do that for the warrior. When the warrior comes back from battle, then they clap and the women come out and dance and all of that. But when the shepherd comes back after beating off bears and lions, nobody's saying, oh, the shepherd has slain his 10,000s and his shepherd friend, you know, his hundreds of thousands or something like that. So anyway, humility, fortitude, patience, courage, tenderness, etc. It's the perfect training in virtue. So Jacob spends 7 years working for Rachel, okay, and then the wedding day comes. You remember how that goes, right? A big party, wedding night, in the morning, sun comes up, he takes a good look at his wife. Laban! Laban! What's going on? It was Leah, right? Leah was in bed with him when he wakes up in the morning. Laban had slipped the older daughter in there. Now, about Leah and Rachel, about their names, you know what they mean, right? Yeah, so Leah, the older sister, her name means cow.
Oh, shit.
How'd you like that as a name, ladies? Okay. And Rachel, her name means little ewe lamb, right? Probably ladies much rather have that, you know, that name, kind of petite sounding, women like petite sounding names and so on. Actually, even though, you know, maybe you might not want to be called cow, Laban, the father, probably meant that as an honor for his older sister, because cows are more valuable, right? And the funny thing about Laban is all he thinks about is what? Money. That's right. He's like Uncle Scrooge. You remember those Donald Duck cartoons where Uncle Scrooge's pupils of his eyeballs would go ching ching, you know, be dollar signs and stuff like that. That's Laban. Only in those days, all your money was in flocks and herds. So if his eyeballs, you know, go ching ching, they'd be with cows and sheep. Okay. So him naming his daughter Leah and Rachel, this is like a banker naming his daughter's dollar and cent. Okay, it's like all he could think of. Like, oh, I gotta think of a name for my daughter. Dollar. That's what the most precious thing to me. You know? So he names his daughters after money. That's kind of the man that Laban was, all into profit. So, you know, Laban is a con man. He outcons Jacob. You know, so Jacob was the conniver back at home. He gets out-connived by Laban. This is God's pedagogy for Jacob to kind of beat that conniving nature out of him. So he gets outsmarted by Laban. Laban tricks him into marrying both his daughters, and then he has to work another 7 years for Leah, right? And so he spends a total of 14 years working outdoors under the blazing sun or the driving rain or snow in winter or beating heat in summer, etc. But learning these virtues. Why? Because he's going to become the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. He's going to become the father of the flock of God, because ever thereafter Israel is going to be God's flock. Of course, he's not the only one. Moses spends 40 years, not just 14, 40 years in the desert shepherding sheep, all to get ready for doing what? Okay. Dealing with the people of Israel, the flock of God. So he spends the same time dealing with sheep animals as the 40 years that he spends leading the people of Israel as he leads them out of Egypt, out to Sinai, and then toward the promised land. And so to learn all the virtues, that's why it says Moses was the meekest man on earth. He learned that meekness from slaving away outdoors and not getting much credit for it with these animals. He learned to just be a very humble man. Later on, David's childhood is spent watching the sheep, and that too is to prepare him to be the great shepherd of Israel. Speaking of David, David becomes the shepherd king, and he leaves us beautiful psalms like Psalm 23. That's from David. But in a later period of Israel's history, when the sons of David become corrupt, God gives a prophecy through the prophet Ezekiel that's found in Ezekiel 34, in which God says, you know what, right now there are all these corrupt shepherds of my people, but the day is coming when I myself will be the shepherd of my sheep. And then later he says, and in that day I will raise up a prince for them. My servant David shall be prince among them, and he shall be their shepherd. And then you stop and you think, wait, earlier in the chapter, Lord, you said that you yourself are going to be shepherd of the sheep. And now you're saying that you're going to raise up David in the final day, and he's going to be shepherd of the sheep. So what's there going to be? Two shepherds, the God shepherd and the David shepherd? But then the next verse says, there's only going to be one shepherd over my people Israel. Like, okay, God, how are you going to work that out? Well, you see, already in the time of Ezekiel, 500 years before the birth of Christ, the prophecies could only be fulfilled if God and a man became one over the shepherd of his people, Israel. One person, both God and man, so that God himself would be shepherding his sheep, and David would also be shepherd, that is to say, the son of David. And here on this site in this region is where we celebrate where God and man came together and became one person in this baby Jesus, who is destined to be the shepherd over his people Israel. And not only over this flock, Jesus says, but I have other sheep to whom I must go, he says in the Gospel of John, in John chapter 10, the Good Shepherd passage. There's other sheep that I must go to. And you know who those other sheep are? You know who they are. They're you and I. And so we are the sheep from the other flocks all around the world, from the flock in Germany, from the flock in North America, from the flock in South America, and Asia, and all parts of the world. And now the sheep, we've been gathered back together to come and celebrate the place where our divine and human shepherd was born. So let's think about these things as we enjoy this holy place. Elias?
Thank you very much.